went from that feeling of criticism, which I'd always thought if you got feedback, it was negative.
And how humans are the only animals that communicate using things like story.
Yeah.
And it became one of our superpowers because the idea of money, it's just a story. It's just...
And I go, that's where I come in. And it would just be this cycle. I got so many clients so quickly. I look quite pretty. You stayed rather close.
It's something like that. And anyway, so I did a lot of that. So I got a lot of rejection, and I got used to people telling me no a lot. To the point in which I didn't care anymore. So you have to get over the sound of your voice, which nobody likes.
Until the audience say, it's like a yoga
Rainbows
teacher.
and puppies and
It's like being like, namaste. How do I know if this is any good?
The talk, the presentation, the speech, afterwards you're going to be having that thought on you.
Or even before, in your prep, you could be saying to yourself, I'm putting all this energy in, and I don't even know if it's any good.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to determine, isn't it? And I think that's why we wanted to do this episode in particular, because sometimes we are such harsh critics of ourselves. And I think, that is a thought that all of us tend to have, whether it's public speaking, maybe for the first time, whether it's your 1000th time. You're always measuring how good you were or how good you're going to be. So I think having this chat, I think, is really important.
Yeah. That hyper judge or the over perfectionist is something to just have a little look out for, especially with the word good.
Yeah.
That feels really subjective.
Yeah, what is good?
What does good mean to you? How do you know if, like, say you were recording a podcast. Say you were recording a podcast. How do you know if it's any good?
Yeah.
How are we sense checking it here? Maybe we could think about that.
How are we checking if we are doing a good job at doing a podcast?
In inverted commas.
In inverted commas. I do a lot of inverted commas.
You do a lot of inverted commas.
I do a lot of that. My grandfather takes the mick and he says, what is it? What's this? What are you doing? What is that?
Bernice.
I don't know. I think because obviously you have someone who maybe is... Think of actors. You look at an actor perform, you go, oh, they played that part really well. They are a good actor. Maybe that's about making it believable. That's their objective, to make it a convincing performance. When it comes to presentations or public speaking or doing a podcast, the objective of us is to, I guess, speak in a coherent manner. We're clear. We're quite calm.
Offer something of value.
Maybe we're not going off on too many tangents. Hopefully, maybe we are.
Maybe we're a little bit indulgent.
Maybe connecting with one another.
Listening to one another. But I think for me that does just kind of that's like a echoing question all the time. Like, is this useful? Is this the most effective way of saying this? Can someone listen to this and apply it today? Like, if they were listening to this on their commute, would they kind of go, oh, that's interesting?
Yes.
That's interesting. I didn't know that before. Or, I hadn't thought of it like that before. I think that's the purpose of talking to anyone personally.
It's exchanging either ideas or information or an outlook.
Yeah, perspective,
That's what communication, I guess, is. Not to go too deep this early on into an episode, but one of my favourite books is Sapiens by Yuval Harari. I read it in lockdown and it was absolutely incredible. And he talks about the power of communication and also the power of story and how humans are the only animals that communicate using things like story.
Yeah.
And it became one of our superpowers because the idea of money, it's just a story. It's just, by the way, do you know paper money is actually cotton and linen? Well, actually, no, it's plastic now, isn't it? It's not actually paper, or was back in the day.
Hell of a segue.
Hell of a segue. Anyway, back to story, that we exchanged ideas as a way of finding rapport with one another.
Yeah.
Money is just an idea. religion, for example.
Yeah.
So you could be someone in Cardiff and you could be someone in Nashville. You're
Mm.
both Christian. You have a common ground despite you have never meeting the other person ever in your life. So stories, it can connect people.
Yeah.
And because communities, if you have over 150 people in your tribe, it's called the Dunbar number. Up to 150, you know everyone in your community. You know who the nice people are, maybe people to avoid, who the plumber is, who does the farming, all that kind of stuff, whatever. When you get past 150, it starts to break down. You don't quite know who's in your tribe anymore. So a way to tackle that is by creating folklore,
like shared story.
Maybe some ritual, gods, for example, in some communities. So it all of a sudden you can create communities higher than 150, and that is why one of the reasons why humans are the dominant species is because we can have tribes, in inverted commas, of hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people under the same ideology or idea.
Bond them with that story then.
Yes.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
So what is your definition of a good talk or performance or presentation?
I personally think it's if it's conscious of the audience and it's for the audience. I think that any form of communication, like storytelling, is to give something to someone else. This is why we were talking about stories, wasn't it? Because we can embed a load of information within a story.
Yeah.
So when we teach like children to tie their shoelaces, we do it through story. Typically, how did you learn to tie your shoelaces? Do you remember?
I can't remember. I think I think I learned off Big Daddy.
Oh yeah, and he does the story.
Loop, swoop, and pull.
Oh, loop, swoop, and pull.
Yeah.
But like, someone isn't it in one part of that film? He says you didn't do the bunny ears.
Yeah.
So it's again imbuing the kind of meaning. Two
ways of getting to the same point, but it's two different stories, I guess, if you want to call it that. I don't know. But okay, so you've just done a presentation, you've just done a talk, or you're preparing. What do you do to judge whether it's good or not? How do you actually quantify that, do you think?
I like to get into something objective rather than subjective. So what I used to do was kind of think, how did that make me feel? How do I think the audience took that? And it was all a little bit abstract or a little bit subjective. Now I think, did I remember 80% of, did I remember and deliver 80% of what I planned to say? Did I make eye contact with most of the audience members? Did I take a breath instead of saying was I clear? Did I have did I have variety even of facial expressions, of tonality, of hand gestures? Did I feel like or did I notice, see that feel comes in, it's insidious. Did I notice times where the audience leaned back or leaned in or laughed or looked shocked or whatever? So I try and make it as objective as possible, because otherwise, if I say I want this to feel like the best thing I've ever done, how on earth can you measure that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so subjective.
And I think a lot of the time now, when it comes to, say, if we were making content on social media, an easy shortcut to see if it was, and I don't agree with this, by the way, that we think if something was any good or not is by views, comments, engagements, that kind of thing. Over the last year, I've done a lot of history content on Instagram and TikTok. So I've made about 80, maybe 90 videos, which have completely ranged in views. Some of them have done a few hundred, some have got 180,000. And I genuinely can't tell the difference between the ones that have got 180,000 and the ones that have got 1,000.
Yeah.
Because I try and follow the same formula. I try to make it as streamlined. I try to do the McDonaldization of content. Learn that word in uni. Basically, we standardize everything, so you can never ever be awful. It's kind of making it so streamlined. Same with the Henry Ford did it with cars, yeah. So I try to do that, but I genuinely sometimes don't know what is pushed in the algorithm, how people respond to it. Sometimes it's just luck of the draw, time of day, what's trending. Do I say keep one video went massive because I mentioned Dobby from Harry Potter? Yeah? And then that blew up, and people in the Harry Potter community were all commenting, like, that doesn't mean my video was good or bad. It just meant I used a certain word and I played the game unconsciously, by the way.
Yeah. It meant it related to the audience. So actually, when we're doing something like a presentation or talk, we do have a pretty good gauge on who's in the audience, typically. But when it's on social media, it's kind of up for grabs. It's a global audience. We really don't know who we're speaking to. So we kind of have to define who we're speaking to, right? So actually, I would say, like, is this any good? Am I speaking to the people that I thought I would be speaking to? And like, actually, in that instance, you've mentioned Dobby. You kind of did speak to them. So it is effective, right? And it did blow up.
Absolutely.
In accordance.
And have you found another way to do it is, say if you're preparing a speech for a wedding, for example, a good way to test it is performing it in front of your family and friends. Because it could be funny to you and it could be great to you, but you will never know until you perform it. And when you're up there on that top table giving the best man speech, it's already kind of too late to test if you're happy with it. Like, I've seen people still prepping their speech on the day of a wedding.
So scary.
And look, some people, if you can do it, hats off to you. I think I can't do that. Some people can maybe pull it out their backside. I can't do. I got to prep.
If you're relating to certain things in the day, like something funny happened, or there's something that you want to refer to, like something went wrong, and you want to kind of appreciate everyone's resilience of banding together. Fine, absolutely. Like the little kind of spices on the top,
anecdotes,
the little cherries, and yeah, absolutely. But I'm with you. I think it's too late after that point. And actually, if you don't feel like giving it away to your friends and family, hire someone, hire a coach, have them, like, it actually, a really good test of a speech is, even if that coach doesn't have the background knowledge on your friends, your family, they're not part of the inside joke, if they can still laugh, it still lands with a complete stranger, you're onto something magic there, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Because you've taken them on a journey through your talk.
I think also doing it even that skill of performing and practicing in front of people as much as you can. I did a lot of Vox Pops when I was working in local TV. If people don't know what Vox Pops is, it's when you ask members of the public to do street interviews. They're all over TikTok now. They've been in news for years and years and years and years and years and years. I'm not sounding too clever. I think it comes from Vox's Populi, which is the word of the people or something.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's so interesting.
It's something like that. And anyway, so I did a lot of that. So I got a lot of rejection, and I got used to people telling me no a lot, to the point in which I didn't care anymore.
That's so hard when someone actually says no rather than an audience member just looking away or going on their phone. That's really hard when that's verbalized. That must have been really challenging.
Not really, and I don't know why. I'm not sure.
The first couple of times though, were you like, oh, gosh, I just didn't make it personal?
I got it from my dad.
I would have quit that day.
I didn't, and some people take it really personally. Go, oh my god, they said no.
That would be me.
I would be buzzing off a no, so I'd be like, come on, give me more. So I would ask everyone, and eventually, because if you wanted to get 3 people and you ask 100 people, you're gonna get 3 people. It's just a numbers game. So I think if you do a speech and you look back and you know what, that wasn't quite great. I wasn't quite happy with it. I would say, instead of shying away from that, get back on the horse as quick as you can.
Absolutely.
Because if you stay in that negative mindset, that's why I asked so many people of Voxes. I didn't take it personally. Like, you may have messed up a speech or messed up a presentation. Doesn't mean that's going to be it for the rest of your life.
Oh, no.
So get back on it, I would say, as quick as you can. And another thing you just mentioned just now is, if you can't quite speak to people or family, a coach is a really good idea. Another idea is, for example, in uni, I joined a couple of acting workshops.
Yeah.
And we all had a Facebook page, a WhatsApp group, and every week we were tasked with doing a self-tape, an audition tape. We put it in the Facebook group, and we would, the person who was coaching us or doing the workshops or the classes, Ross O'Hennessy, great actor, he would comment and give us feedback, but we'd also give feedback to each other. And maybe the first time some people did it was a bit scary. But once you got used to that, then he was pointing out as well. I thought by that point I was quite skilled at self-shooting and doing it perfectly, quote unquote perfectly.
Yeah.
He would say to me, oh yeah, try this. And I go, oh, I didn't think I'd have any notes. But you're never not going to have notes. The top sports people or people in the field are going to have a thing that they can improve on.
That was a huge turning point when I, many, many years ago, wanted to be an actor. it went from that feeling of criticism, which I'd always thought if you got feedback, it was negative, to suddenly switching to like, yeah, give me more. I loved it because it was like, I'm going to get better every single time. And I'm not throwing my mum under the bus for this, but I bless it. When I first remember, I think my first relationship with feedback was showing my mum what I'd written, because I was like, can you just read this to see if it makes sense? I'd always say, can you just read it to see if it makes sense? Low stakes. Don't look at the spelling. Don't look at the punctuation. And obviously, that's a huge part of making sense. So my mum was very confused, looking through, and she's like, oh, I think, and I was like, don't do it for that. Like, I really couldn't take any sort of criticism because I just associated it with doing the worst. Oh, this is it. I should just give up now. So it was really hard for my mum. She was like, it's good. I don't know. Because she was like, I don't know what you want to do. I remember her laughing once and being like, I don't know what you want to do with me. Help. But it's so useful getting feedback.
Do you think your upbringing helped? Like they obviously open for you, giving them something to look at. Like we spoke in another episode about the idea of meritocracy, and in like America they do show and tell all the time. Yeah, we don't really do that in Britain as much.
Yeah.
Do you think you being in an environment where you could show your parents this is my work was a good thing to develop when it came to checking if it was good or not in terms of public speaking?
I think because they ran their own business, it was more challenging to do things like to sit and give the time around homework and things like that. I actually would say where I got the biggest amount of feedback from my parents, which was super useful, and now I'm applying it, was in business and the kind of perspective of harmony of staff, or, you know, there'd be always something would happen that day and it was about them adapting or coming up with a new idea, coming up with a new strategy. For those of you who don't know, my family own a pie factory. And so we've gone through every type of like foot and mouth disease, mad cow disease, Brexit, swine flu, bird flu. I just remember like my family being on like the front page in the newspaper every single time.
Really?
Yeah.
COVID?
Every something. COVID, yeah, they delivered flour to people who were in their baking frenzy. Like, you know, they did it DIY themselves, like got out on the vans and did it, and adapted. And so that to me was way more where that environment of feedback was normal.
Yeah.
So actually the academic feedback, I wasn't used to it and I didn't like it. But things like how to deal with, like, I always remember, like, I was speaking about things that were way above my age. So I was speaking about, like, you know, staff. I remember, like, at 10. And so,
like a little boss.
Like a little boss. So I remember, I actually, not many people know this either. I started my own business at 16. So I was being really jealous of Louis, who we worked with, who started Clear for Men. I was like, gosh, Louis, you're only, what is he, something like 26 or 22 or like he's crazy young. Louis, you're only young and you started this amazing brand, this amazing business. I wish I'd done that. And I was like, oh, I did run my own business when I was 16, 17.
What was it?
An ironing service.
Perfect.
Called the Ironing Fairy. And again, this is the business acumen. We're going so off track. But I worked in a cafe and I put my poster at the till. So I was capitalising on people when they're bored, when you're crunching numbers into the till, they look down at the poster and they'd go, oh, ironing, I hate ironing. And I go, that's where I come in. And it would just be this cycle. I got so many clients so quickly.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Should have kept it up.
Oh, I was busy. It was my mum said, bloody hell, this is like, I mean, it was great. I just watched telly and ironed.
This is way off track. Out of all the chores, ironing is my least favourite.
Oh, well.
Oh, my.
Pay me a quid.
You've never ironed. Actually, no, you've ironed a couple of things.
I iron, yeah.
I would say, this is linking to a different talk we did. I would say, and a tip, if you're worried about ironing, get a steamer, because that will get rid of your problems. I don't have one yet, but
you can literally have like mini ones now in the car.
You can have mini ones.
But yeah, so that was my pool of feedback. There'll be pools of feedback of people who are really good at giving feedback, and you won't have even thought about them. The other way to know if it's good or effective or doing what you want it to do, that's what I think good means, is to record yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
So you said about putting it in for like that peer review of the people in your acting group, but actually this is a huge hurdle that people have to get over. I remember working when I work with most clients, there's a stage where they record themselves, and I remember for every client they find this probably the most difficult thing we do, but they can look back on that recording and think, who's that person? We've only been working together for a couple of months, or you know, whatever, and they're already so skilled. It's like looking back at your first kind of TV appearances, right? You must look back at that and go, wow, there's 1,000 notes I'd have for him.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, ultimately, I'm just kind of chuffed that he kept going.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
That's the other thing, isn't it?
Oh,
he wasn't perfect, but he kept going.
It's actually quite cathartic.
It's very sweet
and like quite nice. But you said about how having someone to look back at your stuff, and if you're first starting out, maybe you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to have to rely on people to see if I'm any good.
Exactly.
People who are the top of their field still get people helping them out. One of the best TED Talks I ever saw was from Atul Gawande, and his talk was, want to get great at something, get a coach. And he's a surgeon, and in his mind he was top of his game, really, really talented, knew what he was doing, had done it for a number of years. And he invited his old, I think it was his old university professor, to come in and observe him doing a surgery. And he said he did the surgery and it was like perfect.
Yeah.
Textbook, couldn't have gone any better. And he thought, I'll have no notes for this. His old professor had like a page full of notes.
Wow.
It was really small things. Like he said, oh, do you know when you were doing it, did you notice halfway through the light that was looking over the person you were operating on moved slightly?
Wow.
So the lighting wasn't quite right. Also, when you were doing certain things, your elbow was going up, so it doesn't give you full control when you're holding.
Control. Wow, that's
And
amazing.
it was
Those little subtle
small things like that. The All Blacks rugby team, they have post-match analysis. They sit there. Any successful rugby team does this. They sit there and watch their
golf
stuff,
pros.
their stuff back. So this idea that only those who aren't used to it need help is completely untrue.
Yeah.
So if you're worried about, oh my God, I don't want to ask for help, the best people get help.
This is it. And I think a really lovely way to ease your way into watching yourself back is to break it up a little bit so that you get into the objectivity, the way to observe yourself objectively, rather than just going, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed by all of this stuff. The sound, the lighting, the setting, how my face looks, how my facial expressions are, my hair, like we're so critical. So we have to break it down. So that what I'd advise is recording yourself, as much of your body as you can. Let the phone kind of stand up. And when you watch it back, first of all, turn up the volume, flip the phone over and just listen. Because you're just focusing on the words, what's being said and how is it being said. Then flip the phone over. Once you're done with those notes, flip the phone over and mute it and just see what's happening visually. Does your appearance marry up with the content? That's a huge one. The amount of people who start talking about, and me included, I watch a video and I'm like, what am I talking about here? It's supposed to be like a really exciting and engaging topic, and I'm furious in my face, and I'm just thinking, well, that's not right at all. Like the audience, it's like a yoga
Rainbows
teacher.
And puppies and
It's like being like, namaste. It doesn't work. You have to let it wash over your whole body. It just means that potentially I'm not embodying the subject enough. I'm not connecting with it enough. I'm just like forcing my way through it. So that can be a really good indicator. But again, breaking it up is a really good way of not letting yourself be overly judgmental, overwhelmed.
Absolutely. And you've got to break through that first barrier of, when I first started looking at edits back, because I had to edit my own stuff when I first started working
That's hard,
media.
isn't it?
You're looking at your own content, so you have to get over the sound of your voice, which nobody likes
until
you edit 100 videos of you.
Yeah.
You kind of get used to it. So now when I hear my people say to me, Do you get weird watching yourself back?
Yeah.
No, honestly, I don't,
I
because I've
don't
seen so
now.
much of it. You probably the same.
Yeah, and I never thought it would happen. I never, ever, ever. I listened to you say that, and I was like, "There's no way in hell I won't be judgmental.
But it
I
goes
won't be
away
soft."
though.
It goes.
It does, doesn't it?
And there's a reason behind that. So the
Is there?
whole not liking the sound of your own voice. There's a couple of different reasons. So first of all, we listen to our voices when we make sound through bone conducted hearing inside ourselves. We're hearing ourselves talk, and we're hearing ourselves as the sound comes outside and through the ear canal.
Yeah.
So it's two different ways. So the pitch is different.
Right.
It just is different. When we record ourselves and listen back, we're like, who is that Mickey Mouse?
Yeah. Yeah, who's that person?
Who is that? They're so squeaky or they're so low or whatever, right? The more you watch yourself back, listen to yourself back, the more your brain, this is absolutely incredible, will bring about, it'll kind of mute the surprise. So you'll anticipate there being a difference, but it'll also make like less variety. So you're hearing a middle ground between the two, which is incredible because it goes, oh, they're going to keep doing this, so we might as well make it enjoyable. But we do genuinely go, what imposter?
Yeah.
And then from a physical point of view, when we're watching it back, we're like, oh, I really should have gone to the gym. Or like, oh, look at my neck. I look fat. Or like all these things that we're doing, these horrible programmed things that we do because we're just mean to ourselves.
We are mean to ourselves. And I think I'll ask this question in a second, but like when it comes to like rehearsing and getting used to the idea of watching ourselves, like you said about your family and you were able to show your mother things. You said it wasn't very comfortable, but like my upbringing, I would get sketchbooks for Christmas and I would remember scenes from programs I really liked.
Yeah.
And then my parents would be like in the conservatory or like the lounge watching telly or whatever, and I'd go in my bedroom and learn some lines and I'd go in and perform it for them.
Oh.
I would do this all the time. And then we'd be out in the pub with our family or friends, and my dad would go, "Oh, Luke, do that." And I would stand up and do my performance. And it was the best ego. So that's what I got. I kind of went to like drama school but as a kid.
Do you know what's mad?
What?
I did the same thing.
So did you?
Yeah.
Did you do the same thing?
I honestly, so my version of that was impressions.
Yeah.
So I'd see something and be like, well, that's kind of jumped out. So there's I can't remember their name, but the guy who does the Kiera Knightley impressions, I was livid. I was like, I did that first.
Didn't do it now. Go on.
I look quite pretty. You stayed rather close. And bless Kiera Knightley, she doesn't deserve this at all. But I just
look, she's fine. She's doing just fine.
She's cool.
It's okay.
She's fine.
She's fine.
It was one of those moments where I was like, oh, that was an interesting choice. And it was the first time I'd seen it. But I honestly grew up with Robin Williams and Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
They were the people I wanted to become them. So every time with the class clown stuff, I used to be like, oh, I wonder if I can do that impression.
Yeah.
Because it was a direct line to attention for sure. I don't know how that comes into is it very good, but maybe it's about what that gives you. The feedback that you get is very sort of nice and fulfilling, isn't it?
So I went to secondary school with all this confidence and I did drama, which was my favourite subject by far.
Yeah.
And I was in year 7, year 8, and I tried to say one of the lines a bit weird, like a bit out there and a bit like, I can't remember exactly how I did it, but I did it in quite a weird voice. And there was a girl, I think she was either the same year below me, I can't remember now, and she looked at me like this. She did like a face.
Judgmental face.
It was a judgmental face. And that knocked my confidence. Because that was the first time it was like, not my character, for lack of a better word, was judged. It was Luke was judged.
Oh.
So that knocked my confidence. But I think that ties into, if we get critique from other people, that can be quite bad. But I think often we are the biggest... Yeah,
we're afraid of it.
We're often the biggest critics of ourselves.
Yeah.
Do you think that kindness and self-compassion plays a big part in this stuff of thinking if you're good or not? Because, especially with social media stuff now.
I would encourage people to, when they're reflecting on their talk, their presentation, think, what's the kind of yardstick, or the inner monologue that's talking back when they're when they're listening to themselves, or when they're watching themselves, or when they're practicing, because they can be ugly. And apparently the voices that are those internal, some people don't have these internal monologues, which I only realized recently. Apparently some people don't have them, which is incredible. Mine was, there's the film Fern Gully, and there's that kind of like black sludge, and it's really evil, and it took over the forest and all this sort of like, and it was like this horrible sort of hypnotic voice, but it said horrible things. That was my internal monologue. Apparently it's made up from all the sort of things that we found shameful or sad or, really hurtful when we were kind of growing up, and family members or teachers or even strangers we could sort of borrow their words, and we kind of use them as a yardstick to live by, of like, make sure you don't, or make sure you do. And I think that can be far worse than anyone else's critical reflections. I would say look after yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Choose people that you trust. Choose people that you revere. The people who've been in management roles, they've gone on these brilliant management courses to learn how to give feedback. If they're not present with you, don't ask them for feedback. Or hire a professional. Again, like I'd say 80% of my job is feedback that I will give in a really careful way, because I'm never lying to anyone, but I know that feedback is very useful. So it has to be honest and kind and useful.
Yeah.
But equally, it's very direct.
I think having someone like that, I think, is really useful. I saw a coach last summer, and as you know, when you do like presenting or acting, sometimes you kind of think no one in my industry really has coaches. It's not really a thing. Maybe you have like mentors or friends or agents and that sort of thing. But having a coach is like, it's not really a thing. And I went, and it changed the flavor of my work completely.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because how I view the world and how my brain works a little bit as well. I quite like when you're freelancing, you kind of don't have any structure.
Yeah.
So you're kind of all over the shop. And I've always found structure quite difficult. I've always been quite late historically. I find it quite hard to like stay settled and like to concentrate sometimes. So having a coach like to write goals down, it was honestly, it gave me direction for the first time in years probably. And my dad did quite a lot of that stuff when he was still alive. So that was, I think I was really craving that direction again. So
it's that outside lens, isn't it? Who are there to go, maybe when you're overcomplicating things, or maybe when you're ruminating on something, they can just go, hey, let's just put some steps down. They're less attached to it.
Yes, and yeah, exactly.
They're not in it with you.
And you think to yourself, oh, he hasn't done any presenting or acting before. How much help can this person be? But it wasn't necessarily the presenting as a thing, and he did help within that in that moment. I needed structure, and so sometimes, even if you're wondering, how can I make sure this thing is any good? Maybe it isn't your writing or how you present is a problem. It could be something like how you structure it, or how
process,
or giving yourself a bit of a time frame, or giving you a kick of the backside, or you just being there to listen to it, that sort of thing. And I think what you said was interesting about how we have to practice being kind to ourselves. And I'm hearing this so much, to the extent in which we're seeing things in like Primark. We see, t-shirts saying kindness, or be kind, or kindness is king. Everyone knows be kind to ourselves. Everyone knows this is a thing. Everyone, likes to, say that as if it's the right thing to do. But whether or not we actually practice it, I don't know. And I think social media's probably got a lot to answer for there. I think you've got to bear in mind as well, some people get a kick out of bringing people down a peg or two. All you've got to do on TikTok, if you ever go on that, is if you look at any video where someone is a little bit different, or a little bit, maybe looks slightly differently, or sounds a bit different, go to the comments and you will see it instantly. People do it
awful.
Not because they actually want to bring that person down. It's because they want people to like the comment, because they think they'll get a laugh. It's almost become a competition. So in a world where we're having t-shirts in supermarket shops saying be kind, you're equally having that side of things as well. And I think we're getting further away from that and closer to it at the same time. And I don't quite understand it. it's almost like, are we practicing what we preach? Some people are definitely doing that, and I don't know if other people are doing it, or is it a loud minority in terms of that language?
It's a big question.
When it comes to social media stuff, especially like when it comes to you working with your clients, I imagine the people who would come to you generally may not have, on average, the most confidence about themselves. Maybe, I don't know, but is that in the monologue? Do you think something that is, from what you've seen, getting better, worse? I think it's always been there, but I wonder if it's getting worse because we are always in a place where we can be judged because of social media. What do you think?
It's really a big question, because I think it also taps into ambition and what people think it takes to get their goals achieved. I think they have to be like drill sergeant with themselves, and they see people out there who perhaps are getting up at 5 a.m. and they're doing a certain lifestyle, and they're sort of, in the cold plunge and stuff like that. And maybe they think it is suffering that's needed. And that's mirrored in the kind of internal monologue. We are in a very stressful world. It is very unnatural what we're doing. We're living in transient communities. I would say the number one thing with confidence is to bring people around you who you can practice being yourself with, and that's rewarded. And actually, social media is that real life. And if it is starting to really impact that inner voice, or you're having those comments come to you, like, either you can mitigate it by turning comments off the post. I turned off my likes. I have no idea what a certain post will get. It'll just say sort of, or someone will comment. There's more likely comments now, I think, but you can turn them off or whatever, or just come off social media or put some boundaries around it. But yeah, I would say, how much do you want to invest in that online world versus the real one?
Yeah, I think that's a big question to ask. I like when I have comments on my videos, and the ones that tend to do quite well, I have quite a lot of comments, and most comments are lovely. You get the odd person who will critique you, or will say that's wrong,
You've
or
missed something
that's,
out.
yeah, you've missed something out. But that's always going to happen.
Yeah.
That's always going to happen, and you try and train yourself to take in the, 100 nice comments and ignore the one negative one. But that one sometimes sticks in your mind. I think that's quite a human instinct as well, to kind of see your flaws. But when it's holding you back, I think that's when you got to realize, maybe it isn't healthy to do that.
Yeah, this comes back to, I can't remember which episode this was in, but the analogy of the boxing ring and fighting your demons. Like, if those demons are getting thick and fast, and you're not doing anything to try and get bigger to fight them off, or you can't tag team anyone in to kind of come in the ring with you and kind of battle them, if they're winning time and time and time and time and time again, you need to start maybe separating yourself from some of those environments. But equally, if you're in that boxing ring, like, I was thinking about this when you just said someone comments on it, especially if it's something that's got a bit of traction, it's seen by more people, frankly, and they want a piece of it. They want a piece of that view, and they think it's kind of association, and maybe we're too kind of concerned with who likes our talks and whatever. Like, I would seriously say, is it more impressive to have your grandmother or a family member or someone come to your talk and think, my God, that has changed my mind? Or is it more impressive to do it with 40,000 people online?
You know what? That's such a good point. And I also think something to bear in mind as well. And I think this ties into when we started thinking about this podcast and how we would do it, and the format, and what we would say, and how we'd come across. And when people do speeches or talks for work, or a wedding speech, or I don't know, say if you're doing an acting gig, whatever it is, when it comes to performing, I think we can sometimes get so obsessed with whether or not it is good, whatever that means, and instead looking at, did I enjoy it? Did I find it fun?
Did I enjoy it? And what was it for?
What was it for?
What was it for?
And we said that with this podcast. I said, look, obviously we want to try and have open, honest conversations about things that we do in terms of our work, and how we can try and make sense of all this stuff, and hopefully give something to people who are listening, who are maybe wanting some advice on this stuff. But equally, if we aren't having fun doing this, then what is the point?
Yeah. Because if those are the stakes, actually, to have a bit of fun and to share some value or some things that we've found valuable, to pass those on, then it doesn't really matter if someone has a negative comment, because it's kind of like, well, that's fine then. You didn't find those two things. We don't mind. But if the stakes are to be loved, to be needed, to be relevant, oh, that is a slippery little slope. For me personally, I think that's too much. So now the talk, I have to have that lightness of stakes.
Yeah.
So if it's, is this good? It's like, is it good enough for now to do those things that I want to do? And actually, a lot of the time, it's like, was it effective? Did I get to practice? Did I get to cut my teeth on some sort of new audience? Did I get to meet new people? Did I get to make new friends? Did I get to, like, there's way more important questions I ask myself now, rather than, was it any good? Or how do I know if this is any good?
Yeah, we're all trying our best, to me.
Yeah.
We're all trying our best.
There's one quote which I want to read.
Go for it.
Okay. I remember hearing this quote for the first time working for a director who really wanted to embolden the cast that they were working with. And I just remember the whole room. It felt like you couldn't hear a pin drop. And I thought that is a really beautiful way of putting it. So it's by Theodore Roosevelt. So I thought I'd read it as a lasting kind of thought on this episode of, is it any good? It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who, at the very best, knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
Beautiful. I think we'll end it there, shall we?
Yeah, so the next time you ask yourself, is it any good? Think of Teddy.
I think it's Eddie.